Now today we're gonna have another webinar on lesson planning. I'm very sorry I was too busy during the last week and I didn't have any opportunity to meet with you on Zoom. Today I'm back here today and with another webinar on lesson planning. So you are going to begin your classes in September and you would like to have great ideas how to design your lesson plan. I'm sure all of you here know how to design it, what parts you should include there. However, we have some more tips and recommendations which can be very handy for you while designing your lesson plans, of course. Now, are you ready for great experience? Here we go. Yeah, let's begin. So today's webinar is on lesson planning. And today the speakers are I am Saudat Tajibayeva, adjunct professor at Webster University, TESOL and teacher trainer. And my assistants are Dilo Barkhonazimova as well as Ella Maksakova. Today we will try to provide you a maximum information about how to boost your lesson plans and what are the most important parts and tips to pay attention while designing your lesson plans, of course. Here we go. So you are in September and you are going to design your lesson plan. So what do you think? What is the most important part to pay attention while developing your lesson plans? Sure, they are content objectives and language objectives. First of all, your lesson plan should contain objective. Without objective, the lesson plan is the person without a heart. I can say that your content and language objectives are considered as a part of the lesson plan here, right? So what is the difference between content objectives and language objectives? Any ideas? Please be active. Do you have any ideas about the difference between content and language objectives, of course?
Maybe answer?
Yes, sure.
Good day for everyone, and Miss Sadat, glad to see you and here. And the difference between content and language objectives are like this. Content is the same you are teaching to students, and language by teaching the new theme. We, as a language teacher, teach them language skills briefly.
Thank you for your response. Great. Now, any other opinions about the difference between them? Feel free to unmute your microphones and provide your opinions. Or you can write via chat box, I mean. So,
hello, may I?
Yeah, Yıldız.
How are you? Nice to see you.
So what is the difference?
So content objectives, I think this is the plan, I think. I mean points, step by step. The theme is taught and language objectives. So this is the, I think, what we are going to teach here.
Yes, you are right.
And language objectives, I think so.
Yeah, great. Thank you for your answer. It was valuable. Now, actually, yes, there's big difference between content objectives and language objectives. So content objectives always answers the question, what? So what your students will know just after this session or lesson. So it shows, here we use CWBAT. It means students will be able to know what, and students will be able to do what, and how will they be assessed here. So for example, if you are teaching a class about traveling, right? So what kind of knowledge your students will get just after you teach this class? So your students can get the information about the types of traveling, right? They will know about it. They will get information what kind of words they can use while they are talking about traveling, and they can know some agencies how to travel, right? So your students will gain the knowledge all about these mentioned aspects. These are called content objectives. And moreover, what will be assessed? What will be assessed here? Here, their ability of how to use vocabulary related to traveling can be assessed. They can be assessed on the knowledge of how to incorporate correct grammatical structures here. So these are all called content objectives. So they always show what will your students know just after your session. So in terms of language objectives, you were right, both of you were right. So here in language objectives, how you will teach them in terms of integrated skills like listening, reading, writing, and speaking, as well as vocabulary and grammar. So, what kind of language will be used to learn this content? Will you use multiple choice questions or will you use videos? Will you use some realia? I mean, ready made templates, right? Or will you use some other assessment tools? And how language will be used to express the content? What kind of phrases, collocations, and what kind of some introductory phrases you will teach your students to use in this content. So in terms of traveling, so you are going to provide vocabulary to, oh, don't write on the screen please guys. So you are going to provide the related vocabulary. How? By using some videos, and they will listen to the video, watch the video, and then they will complete some summary, right? This is your language objective. How you will deliver this lesson, I mean, this topic to your students. If you have your content objectives as well as language objectives, before the lesson. So, and at the end of the lesson, you will assess your students according to your content and language objectives here. And you will identify how well you manage it to explain, how well your students manage it to get this input during your session. This is all about content and language objectives. So what we should pay attention while we are designing these kind of objectives. First of all, the most important thing is to keep in mind the Bloom's taxonomy. How many of you have heard about the Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy? Any ideas? Feel free. Mm-hmm. Have you heard about Bloom's taxonomy? And why do we use it?
Yes.
Can you answer? Yes? How can we implement Bloom's taxonomy? Okay, so first of all, let me just jot down some ideas about Benjamin Bloom. Benjamin Bloom is one of the most famous linguists, and in 1956, he, with his team, designed the taxonomy of language learning. So here you see, Benjamin Bloom and his team put some nouns in the pyramid, and they began with knowledge. And then in the first step, in the first domain of this taxonomy, the students will work with knowledge. Then comprehension, then they will understand, comprehension comes, then they will apply this knowledge during the session, right? So application process comes here. After application, they will see the results and they will analyze these results, consequences of these activity. And then they will synthesis and they will evaluate this activity, this gained knowledge at the end. So Bloom and his team jot down the nouns here. However, coming to 2001, some other group of scientists decided to change this taxonomy a little bit, and they transformed nouns into some verbs. Now, instead of knowledge, they decided to implement remembering because it seemed to be to them that knowledge cannot explain the first stage of implementing the objective here. And then they turn to remember. So in the first stage, now students remember before understanding, and then they understand and apply, of course, and then analyze, and then they decided to change synthesis and evaluation into first evaluate and create. You see, while you are designing your objectives, you should pay attention to all these stages. What your students will do in the remembrance stage, and then what they can do when they understand it, and how they can apply it, and while analyzing what kind of actions they will do and what can they evaluate here before they create some new activity. You see, it is going like cycle. First they are going through lower order stages. We call the first three as lower order stages. They will go through one cycle by going through these lower or level states, and then they will turn to higher order stages, beginning from analyze and ending with creating, and cycle happens again. Why? Because while you are conducting the session and when you are implementing your objectives, two cycles are needed here. First, they will try in the first cycle to in order to understand and have practice with it. And then in the second cycle, they will implement what they have already understood here. Actually, there is some special wheel of verbs. Here you can understand Bloom's taxonomy more. So in implementation of Bloom's taxonomy, you should work with SWBAT. While you are designing your language and content objectives, you will begin with students will be able to. So students will be able to, and then you are choosing one word which is given in this yellow circle to implement your objectives. So in red, we can see our domains, and you can see that we have lower order domains, remember and understand and apply, and we can see higher order domains here, right? So to implement these domains while you are designing your objectives, you should use these verbs. For example, you are designing an objective for traveling, right? For the lesson about traveling. So, and you would like your students to illustrate something here, right? So, and you are using like this. Students will be able to build an illustration related to traveling. So what kind of objective is it? Is it content objective or language objective? Any ideas?
I think it's
Content
language content objective.
No,
Content or
it is a
language?
content objective
Okay, why content objective?
because end of the lesson, students able to know about traveling.
But the question is like, students will be able to build an illustration about traveling. So this is all about how we teach them to know about traveling, right? So this is considered as language objective because we are talking about what kind of method we are using to implement this objective. You see, while you are, thank you very much, guys, for your ideas. You see, when we are designing our objectives, we can use these verbs to develop them. And we should be very careful while designing objectives. Why? Because we should go through the steps while designing them. First, go through the remember stage. And here you can give like this objective for traveling. Students will be able to select the appropriate dictionary related to vocabulary. You see? This is our first objective. And then they will go to the next stage, understanding. The second objective will be students will be able to Explain the poster. Let's say explain the poster. In the understanding stage, they are now explaining. I'm taking the verb here from here, right? And I'm taking the activity here. Explain their speech in posters, for example, right? You see, this is our second objective. Then we will go. So while designing the objectives, we should pay attention to the order of domains. So first remember comes, then understand, then apply, and then by circling order, we will go through all the objectives. Okay, the question comes, should we cover all 6 domains in one lesson? What do you think about it? Should we? Any ideas?
Yes, I think so.
Mm-hmm. Okay, why and
Because
how?
in each lesson we should have these steps.
Mm-hmm.
If we miss one of them, for example, evaluate,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
we cannot assess them.
Yeah, in a proper
That's
way. Yeah,
it
great.
depends on each other. It's like a chain. I think
Yes,
so.
it's like a chain. However, we can divide these domains into 2 lessons as well. For example, in the first lesson, the first cycle comes, like beginning from remembering and then going to understanding and then to applying. First cycle can end in the first session and you can analyze, evaluate, and create some other activities with your learners in the second lesson. But still, both lessons should be about one topic. I mean, should be built on one topic. So, while designing your objectives of the lessons, you should always pay attention to Bloom's taxonomy. And many people ask that what's the difference between content and language objectives and how to implement them. And many people think that it's very difficult to design them, but actually, it's not difficult. First of all, you should have your aim, and according to your aim and topic, of course, here you should choose just appropriate verbs which are related to your topic. In this case only, you can design good objectives here, and you can, of course, design your lesson in a proper way. And at the end of your session, don't forget to check if your objectives were fully covered. And could you assess according to all these objectives? Now, let's do practice now. Now here, I have put 4 steps of designing language and content objectives. In the first step, you will go to Bloom's taxonomy and choose appropriate verb regarding listening, reading, writing, and speaking. Now, they have chosen describe here from all these words, and it is for understand domain. And here, in the second step, you will link to your academic content. So you are having a lesson on globalization, yeah, right? So here you will put the topic which is related to globalization here. For example, it can be globalization of different cafes, right? Globalization of different companies, and maybe even global warming, right? So, and you will connect your topic to this verb, which was derived from these domains, of course. And then in step 3, you will add supports and scaffolds like graphic, organizers, and videos. From here, I mean, from this green circle, right? These are all supports, realia, or some other materials which are related, which are very useful to design during your lessons. And then in the last step, you can go to interaction. So you are now including what kind of interaction you will have with your students. Will it be individual work or group work or peer work? You are writing the type of interaction here. You see, our uh, language objective for first cycle is ready. Students will be able to, I am writing this one, or just you can contract, students will be able to, right? And then I am choosing the domain from here, yeah? And then I'm choosing the verb which is related to this domain, right? And then I am jotting down and I'm including what kind of activity I'm going to give them to understand this, to implement this. And I'm choosing it from green circle here. And the last one, what kind of interaction I'm going to implement here. Now, can anybody design a language objective for globalization? Any volunteers? Okay, guys, be active, please.
May I?
Yes, come.
For the first step of globalization, we can choose global warming.
So,
And reading about the global warming text from newspaper or article.
So please design language objective for this lesson, please. Beginning with students will be able to, okay? Now, can you remember these 4 steps? First, you are taking the verb, then linking to content, then you are using activity, and then interaction. Now here, by looking at Bloom's taxonomy, please design it. Begin.
Well, for remember, maybe record or read about this article. Then to understand, to explain. After reading, give some examples and explain. And applying, just give questions. People should answer for translation of some words or some sentences as a grammar part.
Okay, can I ask you to design one full objective, please? By taking all these 4 steps, beginning with students will be able to.
Can you go for next chart for 4 steps?
Yeah. First, you are choosing the verb from taxonomy, okay? Then you will relate to your content. Then you will mention your activity, and then you will add the interaction type. Okay, it's better to go to Bloom's taxonomy now. Begin with students will be able to. Are you here? Now, guys, be active, please. It's good to implement.
So first, yes. First, global warming. We will read one article about global warming. It's the first step of from 4. Next, second one, we should explain from the orange one. Then
so in the first one, you are going to give them reading a text, right? Right? For remembering.
May I join?
Yes, yes. So you see here. So your language objective will be students will be able to read the text, yeah, about global warming in groups. You see, I have chosen read from our Bloom's taxonomy, and then I added contact global warming, and then I added what they will use text, right? And then in groups. I have added the type of interaction. Do you understand? I guess Ranahan, you were talking, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Ranahan, when you are designing objective, you should design it in a full way, right? So design the next one according to your plan. The second step was what in your plan? For understanding.
For understanding,
It was?
we give
Okay,
explanation.
explain what?
Explain the theme.
But
Maybe
we don't have. Explain by using diagram, maybe, right?
maybe
Do you
yes,
agree?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now
yeah, I
design your
agree.
language objective according to this. Going to these steps. Sorry. So first, begin with students will be able to. Students, yeah. Ranohan, begin.
Students will be able to read the first one or listen. Then they will be able to use by using, as you offer a diagram, global
Yeah.
warming
So
through
for
the world
diagram.
in percentage. Yes, diagram.
So
Then
when you are designing this sentence, I mean the sentence of language objective for diagram here, right? You said they will explain by using diagram, but can you provide full sentence for language objective? Like this sentence.
okay, I will try.
So begin with students.
Students will be able to describe.
No, explain. You chose
Explain.
explain.
Yes, yes,
What?
explain
What?
the global warming using diagram.
Individually or with peers?
Maybe in peers, it may be, yes.
Yeah, in pairs. Now you see, now you have designed a very perfect one. This can be perfect language objective. I mean, while you are designing, just include all this and write at the beginning of your lesson plan. Do you understand what I mean now?
Yes.
Yes. And for each domain, for each stage, you should design one like this sentence, which begins with students will be able to. And then at the end of the lesson, while you are assessing your learners, you will check if you covered, if you have covered all this. So now, can your students it was explained. Yeah.
Yes,
Can you
explain the global warming
by
using diagram.
yes, these pairs. Did they do this? You will check. Did they do this? Could they do this? If they could, now you are winner. It means you could explain everything according to your objective. If they can't do this, in this case, the lesson will have some failure. Do you understand? We should cover objectives all the time, and they should be designed in a very clear way. If you are just counting like okay, they will read the text and then they will explain it in diagram and then they will construct some forecast. No, this can't be an objective. Objective should be written clearly by using these structures. Okay, now one more person wanted, right? Who was this?
It's me, Yıldız.
Yıldız, right?
Shall I continue? Yeah.
You can, I'll give you another topic, not globalization, okay? It will be about the rights of women. So you imagine you are teaching the lesson about the rights of women. So please provide one objective for this lesson, please, by using Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, you should begin with students will be able to. Then you should choose one verb from our Bloom's taxonomy, then topic, right? Then what kind of activity and interaction. Now begin.
All right. Okay. So rights of women, right?
Yeah, the rights of women.
Students will be able Students will be able
Choose
to
any.
identify the text.
Okay, here you are choosing from remember. Now let's turn to higher order ones.
And
Let's turn
okay.
to higher order.
Okay. Students will be able to
Yeah.
compose
Okay, compose. Where is compose? Here, right? In create.
yeah.
Compose.
Compose and criticize the
No, you
rights
can't. You
of
can't add two verbs from two domains
okay.
in one objective. Yeah. In this case, begin with criticize. Begin.
Okay.
Students.
Students will be able to criticize the rights of women. Oh, no, sorry. Criticize
the rights of women by using
self-evaluation, maybe.
Yeah, maybe
self-evaluation. In the rights of women in
interaction.
In the whole group.
Can they self-evaluate in the whole group? It should be individual.
No.
Yeah.
In individual or pair work, maybe.
It's better to say individually because because they are self-evaluating, right? Now repeat once more your objective, please.
Students will be able to criticize, self-evaluation in the
rights of women.
The rights of women by self-evaluation and individually. So individually.
Yeah, your language objective.
I got it.
Ready. Now, anybody else to practice?
Yes.
Yes,
who wants?
I also want to.
Maftuna, yeah, it's good. It's good if you want, because you see, as a teachers, we should always design them properly. Now, I'm sorry, Maftuna, hold on. You'll do it. And at the end of the session, what will you do with this objective?
With this objective?
Will you refer back or no? Will you?
Yeah, I may, yeah.
Yeah, you will refer back to assess, and you will assess, could they cover this?
Even it's if the classmates assess to each other, it is the better, maybe. Yes?
Maybe.
No, the teacher, maybe the classmates, if
they assess each other.
Assess each other. It is
peer evaluation.
Yes, peer evaluation.
Exactly, it can, but still, as teachers, we should check.
Yeah.
They could cover this. Could they criticize
at the end of the lesson?
Right or no? Right?
We have to give our feedbacks.
Yeah. So we will talk about assessment now. Dilal Barhan will talk about it. Just I am referring back to cover all your objectives. To check at the end of the session, you should check. It doesn't matter what kind of feedback you are using. If it is group feedback, peer feedback, or teacher-generated feedback, still we should check if our objectives were covered fully or no. Okay. Now, Maftuna, you will be the last person to practice. Imagine you are having a lesson about reading books. Okay. Now, you know the steps, right?
But I just connected.
Oh, really?
I tried.
First one, you should choose the verb from Bloom's taxonomy. Here. Then you should include the topic. Then what kind of activity you are implementing here, and then type of interaction. And you will begin with students will be able
to actually understanding. Yes.
Understand.
They will be able to understand the new lesson, new topic.
Do we have understand? Do we have understand here from the verb? No, we have domain understand. But you should choose the verb from here.
Verb.
Able to describe.
From understand domain. Which one are you?
Explain.
Yeah.
No.
Explain.
Explain
Chosen.
the story.
Explain it.
Chosen
No.
already.
Predict the story, maybe.
Maybe they
Predict, maybe we can take.
Yes.
Or describe.
match, maybe.
We can take predict, for example, right? So students will be able to predict what?
Story.
Discuss.
Yes, predict
The
story about what?
About
What was the topic?
Reading.
Reading.
Reading books.
Reading.
Reading book by what?
By using. No.
Well, what kind of interaction?
Include with others.
In a group work.
In pair.
Right? So students will be able to predict
the story.
Yes, the story about you can change the places, it doesn't matter. Yeah, the story about reading books in groups. You see, your language objective is ready. And at the end of the session, you will check if you have covered it or not. Okay? So now we have covered how to design content and language objectives here. Now I'm giving the turn to Ella, and she will talk about something different, which is very useful for your lesson planning. Now, Ella?
Yes, thank you very much. I think you all can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, of course.
It was very interesting first part of our presentation, and I guess for all the participants, all those, especially the last two charts, were very effective. And lesson planning will never be a pain for us, for the teachers, and we can do it effectively. Following what Ms. Sadat has told us, we understand that lesson planning begins with setting our goals, objectives, and every other step, assessment, activities, revolves around outcomes. And the next slide, please. Thank you. I think you all agree with me when I say that lesson planning is a structured model. I mean here that it has general elements like opening. Yes, it could be a warm-up. Sometimes they call it introductory part. And of course, every lesson has its closure. What comes to assessment strategies, maybe teacher gives feedback, students are able to make self-reflection, and they're given home assignment. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
But what comes in the middle of this beautiful structure? It's teaching and students part. It's input, what teacher actually performs to help students achieve their learning outcomes and objectives, and how students interact, produce, and practice it. We call it here acquisition, and it consists of three major parts, like input, what teacher explains, what the teacher instructs students about, and how the students can process and how they can practice and produce the language after that. The next slide. What comes to the structure of the lesson, there are some universal parts, opening and closure, but what comes to the acquisition, to the teaching, practice, producing part, we have some variations. So in terms how we arrange our teaching and instructions, they could be deductive, inductive, and when we offer our students an opportunity to produce, there will be some variation that we are going to talk about. You can see that there are some abbreviations here, and it's actually the variations how you can plan your teaching practice part. Maybe some of you already know what does it mean, and you can help me to decipher these letters. If you can share orally or type in the chat group. Any volunteers who can say what does this PPP TTT and ESA means. I will give you a hint because it's all about the organization, the structure of the lesson. Any ideas?
PPP, maybe it is presentation.
Yes,
Why?
you're right.
And
Present.
Productivity.
Exactly. The first P is about present. The second letter P is
practice.
practice. Yes, great.
Yes.
And the last one is when we practice, we are ready to
Productive.
produce.
Productive.
Exactly. Yes, correct. What about the second one? TTT.
Maybe it is teachers.
Teacher training.
Training time.
Think about, we are in a lesson and it's all about how we organize our teachers
teaching time, maybe.
It could be, but it's already another aspect. This is how we represent or how we demonstrate our teaching with PPP.
Maybe teaching tool.
Yes,
Teacher training.
Technology.
I will give you the
Teaching
first
tool
letter, and then you will
techniques.
I think you will move in the right direction. The first
Okay.
T is for task, or some people say test. So we first, when we meet with our students and when the opening is over, we are ready actually to teach them, and we start our lesson with not presentation like in the previous model, but we start them with test or task. The second T is, any ideas? Okay, I will give it a hint.
Maybe task teaching. Task teaching.
Yes. So
Task
test,
teaching time, maybe, yes?
it is task,
Teaching time.
and task again.
Task.
So first you test your students what they know. Do they know anything about the topic or the structure I'm going to teach them? When you know what they know, you're ready to teach. And then after you teach them, you again test what they have learned with you in this lesson. And the last modal, ESA.
May I try? May I
Yes,
try?
of course. You're
Evaluating students' activity, maybe.
Good interpretation, and wonderful that it's so close. The only thing is E.
Maybe
Yes,
evaluation.
Evaluating, maybe.
Could be evaluating, but I will give you the first hint. Engage.
Assess.
E comes
Engage. Okay.
Engaging students.
Students' answers.
No.
Could be answers, but it's about how we model our steps. The first step, we engage. We
Engaging students' attention.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely good interpretation. But the way that defined by scholars, it's engage, study, and activate. Study and activate, because the lesson is not only about teacher's part, right? There is a huge amount degree that the students have to produce and practice. So a part of engaging, when the teacher is trying to do the best to engage the students, there are students parts, study and activate something that they have studied. Okay, very good. Next slide, please. We're waiting for the next slide coming. It's on the way, I'm sure.
It's okay.
The next slide starts with the full information about these models. Okay. Maybe we need to hurry up the next slide. The PPP, TTT, and ESA, the next slide. I will check if I can share myself. Oh, thank you very much. It's here. Yes. Now you can see that when we say present, practice, and produce, it's about how the teacher modeled the lesson. We start with the objectives. This is the foundation of the lesson. Okay, but now we have to do something. We have our goals, but how we will get into that final destination? We will present our lesson in a certain way. This present practice and produce is very beneficial for lower level students because the teacher presents first. Lower level students, they may not be ready to make this analysis, but they will be ready to repeat and practice. A very popular type of the lesson. Task, teach, and task. Very useful for grammar vocabulary lesson, but it's not limited, of course, to grammar and vocabulary, but it's very effective to start with eliciting students' knowledge, what they already know about what I'm going to teach them. And then, of course, you teach, and then you task again, you test what they know. And the last one is engage, study, and activate. When we say engage, we mean we would like to draw students' attention. Yes, to involve them into activity. Maybe it's speaking, maybe it's listening. Sometimes students are very reluctant. They don't want to communicate. They don't want to speak up. They are ready just to listen, but they want them to produce. And we need some kind of hook, something interesting to activate their interest and be willing to involve into the lesson. So the first one is engage. How we can engage our students? Any ideas? What can be attractive or interesting enough to have our students to speak? Any ideas how we can engage them? What works with our students? Teachers, you, of course, you know, you have experience.
Different games.
May I begin? May I begin?
Yes, Ranohon.
Yes, Miss Ella.
I'm listening.
We may ask our pupils their favorite one, and this is also gives, how can I say, interest to the theme, and they try to express and
the voice
thus we get involved the pupils. Yes.
Great. What about an image, an interesting photo or an image without much text under this? Do you think it can work to engage our students? When they see a poster, an image, and it's, yes, an image could be, or a song, and then they listen to it or they see an image and they try to guess. What will happen next? What our teacher is preparing for us, what this picture is going to tell us about. So I would like to try to engage you into a conversation with me, and we will just practice to recognize. The next few slides will be a very simple task for us, I guess, because we will try to recognize what modal is this. You see the steps of this middle part of our lesson. And you see that number one is a Kahoot, it's test or a quiz. Then comes kind of explanation that the teacher does. Then number three, the step is practicing. It's kind of activity. You can see that the teacher gives a quiz or asking to say yes, correct, or false. And then comes a picture where the student can produce less controlled speech. So the question is, which lesson modal do you think it is? Present, practice, produce, task, teach, task, or engage, study, and activate? I can't hear voices, but I hope you are. Sorry, Ranahon, can you repeat again?
Miss Ella, it is the second one. Task,
do you remember?
Teach, and task. Yes, I remember.
Very good, very good. Exactly, we start with a quiz. We want to know, what do students know about my topic? And of course, and then I teach, yes, you see the explanation, yes. And then I check how they understand the forms, and then I give them the opportunity to apply. Again, to what Ms. Sada told us, first they need to understand, recognize, and then apply. It's about Bloom's taxonomy. The next slide, can we move?
Yes.
Yes. In the same task, I would like you to look and to identify the modal of the lesson. We start with a beautiful image of a resting kangaroo. Then we go to read about animals, some interesting facts. Then we do some maybe matching or dominoes activities, and then the assessment.
May I answer?
Yeah,
This is the first one. This is the first one.
PPP.
Present. You are presenting. And the last one is practicing. The second one was
present, practice,
practice. Yes. Produce.
I would like, before I say yes or no, I would like to hear other opinions. I know that there are 27 of us. What other people think about this?
Well, I think it's the third one. It's like
ESA.
ESA, yeah.
Is engage, study, activate. Look at the picture. When I display the picture, do I start with explanation? I just give a student a full arena to make guesses and to share their ideas. Of course, they will be very curious about what the kangaroo has to do with my lesson, with English. And of course, now I think you understand. This is
yes, the third one.
Yeah,
third
great.
You are engaging. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I was trying to engage, and of course, then I give them the food for thought. They will read about it. And the last one, please. The next slide. On the way. The next slide. We're waiting. Okay. Which lesson model is applied here? We start with
TTT.
TTT. Okay. Let's go through the steps together, and then you will share your understanding. The first step that teacher does start with students. They review the material that was taught before, previous lesson. Then teacher immediately start with a rule. I see this is present continuous. And only after that, there are activities to practice forms and to practice the free speech. So what do you think it could be?
The first one, it is a traditional one way of teaching. You are presenting here is a grammar first, rules, then practicing, and the last one is
the last one was production. Yes. Practice and then production. That's traditional method. You're right, Ranahon, and we're all very much acquainted with it. Maybe this is our first aid, first aid tool at lesson production. But lesson planning has much more than only PPP, and now you have looked at two optionals and very effective tasked, teach and tasked, and study and activate. And the last slide that I would like to share with you, it's just like in a nutshell, the steps of the models that we have covered together right now. It's about TTT. They're all universal about opening and closure, but what comes in the middle, here you can play with how you arrange your teaching, activity, practice, and production formats and activities. That's basically all that I would like to share with you today now, but our webinar is now followed by Dilabar Hon, who will be talking about assessment strategies.
Thank you, Miss Ella.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So thank you very much, Miss Ella, for giving. We have very short of time, and we can just use this time wisely in order to have just input session, rather than having interaction. And here I would like to describe the assessment strategies which can be applied in your own classroom. And without assessment, I think it's very difficult to have effective and successful lessons. And firstly, what we need to consider is the types of assessment in our own classroom. Maybe you know about the types, and here I would like to introduce some forms here, formative and summative assessments, which can be applied in different times of your lesson plans. And here, as you can see, these types of assessments are divided into two, and they are differentiated according to the time and place they are applied in classroom. So firstly, we have formative assessment here, which is applied during the lessons, and you can just apply it at the beginning of the sessions or at the beginning of the course. So it is called just assessment for learning, as well as it is just help students to improve their learning while doing some tasks For example, if you just apply a kind of a quiz for your students, they will be learning, acquiring something while they are doing the task. And we have summative assessment, which is held at the end of a semester or at the end of a unit, as we all know about the midterm assessments or final tests at universities, right? And we have a summative assessment is also called assessment of learning. So students will be just summarizing what they have learned during the course or semester. And here, as you can see with the help of this Venn diagram, I have just illustrated some differences and similarities of these two assessment types. And as we know, these assessment types can be applied with for teachers and students as well. At the same time, it's very crucial for teachers. So why we need formative assessment for teachers? So firstly, to monitor our students' learning, if they are learning something from our lessons, yes, and to ascertain their progress, if they are developing with the help of this kind of quizzes or crosswords during the lesson, and to check their understanding. When you apply formative assessment, you can see that if the students are having lessons very just comfortably, and if they are understanding the point they are delivering, and to teach responsibly as well. While summative assessment help teachers to measure whether a student has met learning outcomes and to what extent at the end of a unit of a study. So as Ms. Sadat explained it at the beginning of the session, so it's very important to set some goals, yes, objectives, outcomes of the lesson. But here, when we talk about summative assessment, you can see the outcomes which can be achieved at the end of a unit. And it's very helpful for teachers to make further improvements in future iterations. So with the help of test results, you can just easily change, or you can just have some modifications in your teaching. And why we need formative assessment for students here? So firstly, it's very essential for them to evaluate their own learning and to build knowledge, to identify strengths and weaknesses in learning. So what they are learning well or what they are not learning equally with others, and to continually improve their learning and to target their learning as well. And summative assessment helps students to understand their overall performance in a unit of study. And of course, with the same with teachers, they will be able to understand whether they have met the learning outcomes and to what extent at the end of a unit of a study. And the similarities of this formative and summative assessment can be illustrated here, that they are both considered as ways to assess students' learning, and they are opportunities to give and receive feedback. With the help of formative and summative assessments, we can just have students provide feedback to each other, or we can just provide constructive feedback ourselves as teachers. And they are the ways to evaluate the effectiveness of teaching. As I have mentioned above, it's very essential having this formative and summative assessments to just guide your teaching. The results will be basis for you to have modifications and amendments in your teaching. So in the next slide, please. In the next slide, I have just provided some information about the quick and easy ways of formative assessment strategies where you can apply it in your own classroom as well. So firstly, we have index card assessment. So it's very helpful, at the same time very easy to apply in your classroom. So for this one, students will need a card where they will be writing one thing on the one side and one thing on the other side. So one thing will be, they will be writing about a big idea which they have understood during the lesson, and one thing which they don't understand during the lesson. So here you can just promote collaboration, group collaboration, or just peer collaboration with each other, or you can just provide answers for their misconfusions as well. And here we have another strategy that's called 1 minute essay. Here you will assign a question for all students and give some time for them to think about. So in a minute, they can write everything about they have learned about the lesson or topic you have covered. And the next point is journal entry, which is very helpful with introvert students, as we all know that some students cannot ask every question besides in front of the audience, and they may have some difficulties with combating with public speaking. So in this case, journal entries help students to fight with them. So here students can write down everything they have learned from the lessons. Every student can write, of course, and then they can write some questions which arise during the class. And of course, after the lesson, you can just address the students and then make just these questions answered with the students. And we have brain dumps. So it's another quick way of formative assessment which can be applied in your classroom. This is like when you have covered everything in your lesson, when you have, for example, explained the usage of present perfect, you can have a 3-minute pause and then ask students to write everything about what they have learned during the class. And more importantly, here we have provided some prompts to use. So students will be writing with the help of these prompts, and they can just improve their speaking as well, how to just speak formally, how to write formally as well. And the next point is about hand signals. This is very, I think, popular and famous among the ESL teachers because hand signals are very famous. So students can just show their fingers in terms of their level of understanding. For example, if they just understood everything, they can just show their all 5 fingers, right? If they have misunderstanding, they can just show their 4 fingers. Or if they have understood very little information in your lesson, they can just show only 1 finger during the lesson. Or at the same time, you can apply the thumbs up and thumbs down method. So if they understand the lesson very well, they will just raise their thumbs. If it's like vice versa, they can just put their thumbs down. And the last part here, we have concept maps. I think it's very essential and useful with the students, as most of our students account for like visual learners, and it's very beneficial with this kind of learners because they can just see and they can learn a lot with the graphic organizers, and they can just connect the ideas, connect the concepts to each other when they have learned everything. So for this, you can just apply some Venn diagram in order to have just similarities or differences between the topics, or you can just ask students to have a web, just connecting the ideas to each other. So these are very effective ways of formative assessment strategies for students in class. And it's very easy to use. As you see, it doesn't take so much time, and formative assessments should be applied during the classroom as well, not outside the classroom or at the end of the semester. And you can just provide formal or informal feedback for formative assessments. And in this slide, I have just provided a table which I have been using with my students in class. So as you can see, that's called KWL method. And with the help of this method, you can just assess students for as a way of formative assessment. And here at the beginning of the lesson, when you introduce the topic, you will just distribute the papers with the help of this table, of course, and they will be writing down everything they know about the topic. For example, if it's just present perfect, they can write everything about present perfect if they know. And on the second column, they will be writing down everything they want to know about this topic, yes? And then during the lesson, you will have some discussion parts, and you will just get some questions, answers. And at the end of the lesson, you may just apply the last table, and students will be writing about everything what they have learned during the class. So, and the answers will be just announce it with the help of the students. So here also you can just promote students group collaboration. They can, if there is any kind of questions and answers, students help each other. And summative assessments, here you can see that I have provided some forms or samples for summative assessments. So written reports, practical examinations, yes, and written tests, projects, creative assignments, and presentations, portfolios, peer and self-evaluation can be just applied in your classroom as a way of summative assessment. And it's important to mention that when you have a summative assessment, it's very crucial to have rubric, checklist, or a kind of a criteria to evaluate your students, because with the help of this rubric or some criteria, your tests or your kind of examinations will be reliable, and tests can be applied in any classroom. So these are all about formative and summative assessments, which can be applied in your classroom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dilawar Khan. It was really quick, but concise and clear explanation. Now, I would like to mention the last thing, which is really significant while designing our lesson plans. While designing your lesson plans all the time, don't forget to include CCQs and ICQs. Do you have any opinion about what are they? What is CCQ and what is ICQ? Any opinions? Mm-hmm. Participants?
No opinion.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time I'm
Okay, so
listening
CCQ
about it.
is
ICQ.
ICQ. So what is ICQ?
ICQ is teaching, like testing the understanding.
Yes, right.
ICQ.
Instruction checking questions, right?
Yes.
And CCQs are concept
CCQ is
checking questions.
CCQ is implementing something from the point of an situation. For example, a person cannot be a genius, but he can succeed in some area. He can succeed in some situations, even if he doesn't know about this.
Okay, thank you very much for your ideas. Right. So what are CCQs and ICQs? They are really important in designing lesson plans, as ICQs are always asked before the activity or task. When you are explaining what to do in this activity, you will ask your students ICQs, and they are called instruction checking questions. You will just want to know how well your students understood what to do in this task. You can ask, are we going to cover traveling today? And your students will say yes. Are we going to cover vocabulary? They say yes. And then, are we going to travel anywhere? They say no. So you see, because your task was to teach vocabulary of the lesson for traveling, not taking them somewhere for traveling. So ICQ questions are always asked at the beginning of the lesson or before the activity. After your explanation, what to do in the activity or what to cover during the session, you can ask ICQ, instruction checking questions, and the students will answer by using yes no questions, because your questions for instruction checking questions, ICQs, will be designed around general questions which require yes no answers, right? So what about concept checking questions, CCQs? CCQs are asked from the students after launching this activity, I mean after fulfilling this activity, or at the end of the lesson, to know how well they understood the grammar explanation or vocabulary concepts of the session or of the task. So concept checking questions are the questions to identify how well your students understood the input of the session, which is based on mostly grammar and vocabulary concepts. But ICQs are the questions which are asked before the lesson, when you have already introduced your topic, and then you would like to identify if your students understood what kind of lesson you are going to have or what kind of activity you are going to do with your students. So implementing ICQs and CCQs into your lesson plans is really important. There are two types. you can use them just one ICQ, not one set of ICQ. I mean 3 or 4 questions just at the beginning of the lesson. And here all the questions are designed with general type of questions. Will we cover globalization today? Are we going to learn topic vocabulary of globalization today? Are we going to criticize globalization today? And if you told beforehand, if you told the students that you are just learning the vocabulary related to globalization, in this case, the last question about criticizing the globalization will get negative answer. No, because you didn't explain to your students that you are covering it. So ICQs are used to check if your students have understood what to do during the lesson or before activity, what to do in the activity. And CCQs are concept checking questions which are asked at the end of the session to identify how well your students understood all these concepts which are related to globalization. For example, they can be are we do we use some topic vocabulary which is related to globalization? They say yes. So okay, so are these words, you will mention the words, right? Are these words related to globalization? The answer will be yes. Did we debate the concepts of globalization? They say no. Okay, you can relate some grammar to this lesson, right? In terms of globalization here. For example, you talked about passive voice, right? So can we use passive sentences in terms of globalization, explaining about globalization? They say yes. So in CCQs, you will determine how well your students understood everything. So that's all for today's webinar. Today we just wanted and tried to cover the main aspects of lesson planning. But actually, designing lesson plan is a very long-term process, right? It cannot be covered in one webinar, never ever. So just we wanted to touch the most pivotal parts of this, which are really important in designing these lesson plans. Do you have any questions, guys? If you have, you are welcome, of course. No, I guess, right? As you are silent. So, so in this case, yeah, in the next webinars, stay tuned. The most interesting is coming next week's, right? So thank you very much for your attention, and we very hope that all the concepts which were covered during today's lesson planning session will be really handy in the future in your designing lesson plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was really, really great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. We have got very important informations.
Thank you. Yeah.
It was really, really excellent. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.